Welcome to Yates Makes. So here's a quick preview of what we'll be dealing with today. Just a quick video on how to transfer fairly delicate illustrative drawings using the gel plate. Demonstrating a method where you can reuse your transfer method to then get multiple prints, ideas on hand colouring, mixing in some collage or mixed media elements to add some interest to your kind of final outcomes, but also to kind of keep your interest as the maker going as well. Now these ideas are very much an extension of videos I posted fairly recently that I'll link below that you may want to watch prior to this one or after this one, just to get a better idea of where they've come from, how I've arrived at this point. Okay, getting started. Well, you're going to need a drawing and a piece of mount board. Now I've actually done a digital drawing here that I printed out. This process will kind of wreck an original drawing, so if you're fond of it, get a photocopy of it or scan it and print it out. So I've rubbed some graphite on the back of my drawing, and all I'm doing here is just transferring it lightly onto my mount board. Now this drawing I've chosen because it's got some simple but quite delicate outlines and just some very flat fills. I didn't bother rendering it on the iPad, it was just a quick sketch that I block filled. So the idea is here that now that I've got my image traced out lightly, I've got a ballpoint pen here and I'm re-outlining, but this time pressing in, making an emboss, which is a technique I've covered before on the channel, and I've just embossed at different pressures to try and vary the quality of line. So skipping on here, what I'm doing now is thinking about the areas, thinking tonally really, thinking about the areas that I want to keep quite clean, and other areas that I want to maybe generate a little texture and a little tone. So I'm outlining with my scalpel there, mainly the background at the moment, and pulling away areas of the background just by inserting the edge of the knife and just peeling away those top layers of the top layer of the surface paper and some of the pulp that's inside the mount board. So this is going to hopefully vary the tonal and textural qualities by, well, all of these parts are going to make different amounts of contact with the gel plate. Some are going to directly touch the paint and therefore lift it all. Some are barely going to make contact, even though we're talking only a millimetre in some cases and some cases less depth of emboss and peel away and kind of reduction here. Okay, I've finished carving, cutting back, and I've got my light angled low, so hopefully you can see, these areas where I've carved in deepest. I'm hoping that they don't disturb the paint on the gel plate, and then will give me a nice dark tone. Here where I've lifted off just the surface paper, I'm hoping to pick up a bit of the paint and therefore get a kind of mid-tone or a very light texture, and I'm hoping that these areas pull off the paint and give me a nice clean area, because that's the lightest areas I want in my image. The stems, the stalks have all, I've left those fairly undisturbed except for some line work, hoping that will kind of, and there's some outlining as well on the actual bells of the flowers themselves. Anyway, look, we'll try a transfer, see how it goes. For this first transfer, I'm using Lamp Black Amsterdam acrylic, and the key things to aim for here are a nice even layer, not too thick because that's going to really clog up those sort of delicately embossed lines on your collagraph plate, we'll call it, on mount board carving, however you want to describe it. But you want to work fairly quickly as well. You don't want that paint to dry on the plate at all. So plate goes down. Now this is the first time I'm using the plate, so it should drink up that acrylic paint fairly quickly. It shouldn't need too long to dry, or for the paint to dry and adhere to that Collagraph plate. So I'm putting a book down as well, just to try and distribute the pressure evenly. Obviously I want to get as even a transfer as possible, so I figured the book would help distribute that pressure. You can never fully be sure of how hard you're pressing from one part of the plate to the next. I've left this down. This is slightly speeded up, but I think I've left it down for about 30 seconds or so, just to make sure that paint has dried and adhered to the Collagraph plate. Now peel it up gently. I should have probably flipped it and pulled the plate from pulled the gel plate from the mountain board, but you can see there I've got what I was aiming for in that those areas where I've really pulled away to the pulp, I've got some varied textures and tones, and the line work I've embossed in ballpoint pen has come out quite clearly. So this first transfer, I'm just let that dry obviously, and I'm now using a layer of white acrylic just to see how it goes in as an image, to see if it's worth pursuing, if it's worth doing a second copy and hand colouring, investing that extra time. So again, a nice thin even layer, making sure I've got everything covered. While that's wet, that wet layer is going to be what sticks to the paper, plus my black transferred image, and hopefully all pull at the same time. I'm assuming you've done some gel plate printing before, so you'll understand this concept. So there's the pull. Because I didn't really want to buckle the paper, I'm flipped it and I'm peeling the gel plate off of the paper rather than peeling the paper from the gel plate. And I'd masked off with some tape as well, just to keep my border a little neater and tidier. So look, I'm definitely encouraged. I've got a decent amount of detail there. I've got some nice tonal variation, and a perfectly acceptable kind of black and white print. So what I moved on to was, wanting to know how well the plate holds up through multiple prints. Does it preserve its delicacy? Does it get clogged up, etc.? So I'm doing a second transfer here with a view to, if it's successful in this first stage, letting it dry and then building up some colour, some hand painted areas. So again, same principle as before, nice thin even layer, and plate goes down, book, well, masking off a little on the edges. I'm going to put my book on the top and distribute some pressure onto the back of that, making sure I've left it for at least 30 seconds, maybe even longer, because this is the second time I've used it, and that first time would have essentially sealed the plate. The paint would have essentially sealed the plate, making it less absorbent. So again, this is slightly speeded up, I reckon about 40-45 seconds. And peeling up, you can see probably added a little more pressure this time, probably left it a little longer. It certainly pulled more paint off, but it's in this case going to work to my benefit because I'm intending to hand paint anyway, so it's nice to have kind of relieved the plate of some of that paint, just to kind of give me options for hand painting. So this first stage I'm blocking in the lightest areas. Now the bell flowers on this plant, I'm not sure what the plant is, that I've done a sketch of, they are the lightest part. They're very kind of pale bluey grey white colour, so I'm just blocking those in. And if you've not hand painted before, I mean, I've had varying degrees of success with this. Sometimes you need a couple of layers. If you want a really opaque white layer or very light layer, I would definitely run a couple of coats of paint over it. Again, I'm mixing up just a slightly lighter tint really of my original colour that I transferred with. This is for the leaves of the plant, so I'm just again hand painting those in. And this is time consuming, I won't lie. I wouldn't really be into it or interested in it if I didn't know I could reuse the plate and get multiple prints, because you may as well just do a drawing and hand colour the drawing, or do a painting, or use watercolours, use gouache or whatever. So having got a nice transfer of the design of the image, I was prepared to give it a go. Okay, that's more than enough fiddly brushwork, so I'm now kind of blocking in some of what is essentially going to be background really. I'm just with the smallest roller I've got, just patching in really, just building up some slightly lighter areas or thinner areas of paint so that I can sort of blend and mix in a few different colours. So I've mixed in some ochres and some oranges, and now popping some very pale greens in as well. So you've got to think in reverse. So when we pull this print, what's going to be on top is going to be your drawing, your design. Our first layer we transferred, and then everything that I'm building up on top is actually going to be underneath, if you know what I mean. Okay, now mixing in some blue. I'm kind of using my spare plate here as a palette, letting those colours seep into each other, hoping these sort of more blended, thinner layers are going to be slightly contrasting to the more opaque colours that I've blocked in the bell flowers of the plant and the leaves. So again, masking off just to try and get things a little neater. Using some, I think this is like Naples yellow green they call it. It's another in the Amsterdam range. It's a colour I use quite a lot. Just patching in again with my little roller, and almost ready to do the final pull. Making sure all these layers are fairly dry in between application as well. Okay, so with it kind of masked off, you'll see why this is a bad idea in a minute. Far would have been made more sense to just peel that masking tape off and kind of clean the image up. We'll get to that in a second though. So with my larger roller now, this is gel medium, which is obviously it's transparent, which is why you can't really see it, but this is going to be my wet layer that I'm using to pull the print. So I'm using a liberal amount here. Like, you want to make sure you've covered all of your image. It's got quite a few layers it's got to pull from the gel plate. So the disadvantage of using gel medium is you can't always be 100% sure of exactly how much you put down. So I probably over-egged it a little bit, but better to be safe than sorry. So paper goes down, nice even pressure on the back, and a little rub with the Baron, and again some weight on the back. Now I left this for probably good 10 minutes or so. As I said before, there's quite a few layers of paint to pull from the gel plate, so you really want to make sure that gel medium has fully dried, give you the best chance of pulling up your image. Again, I've flipped it and I've peeled the gel plate from the paper to avoid buckling the paper, and you'll see why here. Look, I've left that masking tape on the image, and of course it's some of the gel medium where I'd been a little too liberal with it, had kind of seeped under, and I'm starting to rip edges a little bit, but it's okay, it didn't really impact on the print. So, and it did give me a fairly clean edge, if that's what you're after. So anyway, looking at the image, what I was aiming for in terms of like some tone and texture implied by the original layer and that sort of carved mount board, embossed and varying degrees of carving. I've got some tone and texture, I've got some opaque layers, and I've got some colour. And just to show you that you can keep reusing these, this is like the third or fourth pass now, and that surprisingly is not clogging up too much. You can see if I flipped it over there, that's fairly similar to the initial transfer I'd done on the first time I'd used this block. So it is worth the investment, I'd say. So let's look at a second example, just to give you some other ideas. I'm going to zip through this bit because you don't need to see it. This is a drawing I've done in my sketchbook. Funny enough, this one is my son was digging around in our family history and worked out my great granddad was a chimney sweep. So I was actually away and near where he used to live. Found the street, found the house he lived in, and figured, well, he probably had cleaned some of those chimneys. I mean, you'd clean your neighbour's chimneys first, right? So I did working from some photographs I took on that day of chimney stacks, and it's quite autobiographical. So I'm going to zip through all this lot. This is just me thinking about how I might add some other elements, text, some graphics, some more kind of features that add context and meaning. Putting my tracing paper down because I'm going to trace off my image in order to transfer it, just so I don't ruin the original drawing. Okay, I'm going to move along, at risk of being repetitive. I've moved along here to this is me at the kind of embossed stage of the mount board that I've transferred my tracing onto, and again using my ballpoint pen. I've just stopped at this point though, because if you've got any straight edges that you want really thin, I've worked out that you can use a craft knife, a scalpel, and you can get a really fine line using the point of the blade of your knife to cut into, not fully through the mount board, but certainly puncturing that top layer of paper and into the pulp, and you get a much finer line obviously than with the ballpoint pen, and get a nice variety and quality of line. So this image is architectural, so it's got a lot of straight lines in it. It's also got this telegraph pole in it as well, which will probably disappear one day when everyone goes to fibre broadband or whatever and nobody uses house phones anymore. So I'm doing that peeling back just as I did before, because I want to get some areas of texture and tone. Okay, I'm going to speed through this part of the process because you've seen it once already, and the only change here is that I've used the knife to kind of emboss some of these lines. Now, just like with the first print, I did a quick test just to see how the image was holding up, which is why you see now the Collagraph, the mount board plate, has got some paint on it. The transfer went fine. All I'm doing here is obviously these scalpeled lines are very thin. They're liable to clog more easily than the ballpoint pen. So I'm just remarking these in just in case for my second print. And my second print is the one that I'm going to have some fun with adding colour to and thinking about some other features. So what you see me doing here is thinking about an extra little layer that I want to block out, which is going to be again, this is added to the story of where this photograph was taken, where the drawing's from, and some sort of family history. So I want this little area as a kind of window that I'm going to block out and add something else into. So I'm all set to go. This time I'm not going to transfer in such a dark colour because I don't want it to dominate the image. So I'm mixing up some I think this is like Payne's Grey and just like a mid grey. I think the Payne's Grey was Liquitex, and the just like the mid grey was Amsterdam paint. So again, I'm mixing this directly on the paint. It's probably not the wisest thing to do because it takes longer and your paint is at risk of drying out too much. But it wasn't really an issue for me that this was really well mixed, just that it was fairly even in terms of thickness on the plate. So rolled out and got just about enough coverage there. Don't mind if my edges are a little fuzzy. Plate goes down. Some pressure with my hands first. In fact, this time I didn't even bother with a book. I just thought I'd give it a go. Made sure I've got a good contact, and I'm actually pressing fairly hard. It's quite hard. This is difficult to communicate on a video, but I'm pressing fairly hard with my fingers there just to make sure it's definitely made contact. Again, about 30 seconds. This is all filmed, this is all real time, so about 30 seconds I'd say. Peeling up my edge nice and gently. You can see that's already buckled my Collagraph plate. Probably wise to flip it and try and peel the plate off, but it kind of, it will still work. And you can see there that I've got some areas to clean up. That's easy enough to do with some masking tape. Some of those blotchy areas, that's all cleaned up. Again, just like with the last example, some hand painting. I decided this time just to paint in the highlights on the chimneys. I wanted this one to be far more subtle, so I've done the shadows and the highlights. Now you can see that the little section I kind of added a Collagraph rectangle to has given me an interesting little window up in the sky that I'm intending to add something to later. You'll see. Now these layers are completely dry now on my on the gel plate, and I'm thinking it would be nice to sort of add some text, and I'm doing this with my graphite pencil. It's a fairly heavy, thick graphite pencil, gives me a nice bold quality of line. And just like with your chalk pastels, with your charcoal, you'll find that graphite transfers directly onto the plate. It's quite faint and hard to see on the video there. I'll zoom in, but it will give you a nice quality of line. You can see that I've used a little bit of paper to mask off there, the same piece I'd used before, just to make sure my graphite is not going over my little window I've made. Again, I've got my gel medium, which is what I'm going to use to pull this print, rolling it out nice and evenly, and this time picking the gel plate up and just very gently from the edges flipping it over onto my paper just to try and get it roughly in the middle of the paper, and it should all be fine. You can see the text a little clearer there actually. You can see how that is a very faint kind of feature in the sky. So again, I'll let that dry with some weight on it for a good, 5 minutes. It wasn't so much heavy build up of layers to put in this print, so I didn't need quite as long. And there you go. Some interesting textures. I kind of like the vaguely coloured bits. And last little feature, which is kind of ties into the story. It's a long story involving a chimney sweep and a banjo and a snapped banjo string, so I'm just going to put the notes of the banjo strings down with my Letraset, that sort of rough rectangular window. And it's an old tenor banjo, so it's just got 4 strings. And 4 strings, 4 notes. And yeah, funny enough, this banjo is sort of hanging in my house, one of the few legacies, kind of heirlooms of this side of my family. So there you go, just finishing up, and hopefully this video has given you a few ideas of how to kind of manipulate your plate, how to exploit your plate to get some more illustrative, kind of more subtle ideas than, you know, the previous mount board videos I shared with you. And you know, if all that good stuff, if you enjoyed the video, you want to see more, subscribe, you'll get your notifications. Drop a like, drop a comment, all these things help push it out to other people who might be interested. And yeah, I'll see you very soon, for I've been working on another video which is, I haven't quite decided on how to phrase it, how to pitch it to you at the moment, but it's kind of more like, how do you work on a series of images at the same time, and why that's beneficial. And there you go. I'll see you all again soon. Take it easy. Ta-ta.